Dr. Evelyn Hartley was a name that carried weight in the halls of UCLA's mathematics department. She wasn't just another professor. She was the professor, the one students whispered about before exams, the one who could make or break their grades with her infamous surprise quizzes. Her lectures were known for being intense, challenging, and sometimes downright intimidating. But Dr. Hartley didn't care much for popularity. All she cared about was excellence, and making sure her students understood that math wasn't for the faint-hearted. Her classroom was like a battlefield. Every day she walked in with an air of authority, her sharp eyes scanning the room as if daring anyone to slack off. Students sat stiffly in their chairs, gripping pens and notebooks, bracing themselves for whatever curveball she might throw at them. And trust me, Dr. Hartley loved throwing curveballs. Whether it was a sudden pop quiz on integrals or a tricky word problem involving multiple variables, she always found ways to keep her students on edge. Some admired her passion and dedication, while others simply feared her. Either way, no one could deny that her classes left a lasting impression. One crisp autumn morning, something unusual happened. As Dr. Hartley entered the lecture hall, her gaze fell upon a man sitting quietly near the back of the room. He looked different from the usual crowd, older than most students, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, his dark hair slightly messy but stylish. At first glance, he seemed out of place among the sea of eager young faces. Who was this stranger? Was he auditing the course? Or maybe he was lost? Curiosity piqued. Dr. Hartley paused mid-step. "Excuse me," she said, raising her voice slightly, to address the man. "May I ask who you are?" The man glanced up, looking both surprised and amused by her question. "Oh, sorry," he replied in a calm, measured tone. "I'm, John." His voice was soft yet confident, carrying a hint of charm that made several heads turn. "I've enrolled in your class under a pseudonym. Just wanted to blend in." A murmur rippled through the room. A pseudonym? Why would someone go through the trouble of using a fake name to attend a calculus class? Before anyone could speculate further, Dr. Hartley narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Understood," she said curtly. "But let me be clear. My class isn't for casual observers. If you're here, you'll participate like everyone else. No exceptions." John, or whoever he really was, nodded politely. "Fair enough," he said with a small smile. "Looking forward to it." As the lecture began, Dr. Hartley couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this mysterious newcomer than met the eye. She decided to keep an eye on him, partly out of professional curiosity and partly because she sensed he might disrupt the carefully controlled environment of her classroom. Little did she know, her instincts were right, but not in the way she expected. Over the next few days, John attended every lecture without fail. He sat quietly, taking meticulous notes, occasionally nodding along as Dr. Hartley explained complex concepts. Unlike many of her students who struggled to keep up or grew visibly frustrated when things got tough, John remained unfazed. In fact, he seemed almost relaxed. It was as though he already knew the material inside and out. This only fueled Dr. Hartley's suspicion. To test him, she started peppering her lectures with impromptu questions, calling on random students to answer. Each time, she deliberately avoided John, wanting to build suspense before finally putting him on the spot. After all, celebrities, or so she assumed he must be given his polished demeanor, rarely ventured into academic territory unless they had something to prove, and proving himself was exactly what she intended to make him do. Finally, the moment arrived. During one particularly grueling session on derivatives, Dr. Hartley turned her attention directly to John. "All right, Mr. Mystery Man," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let's see how well you can apply what we've learned today. Solve this equation for me, please." She scribbled a moderately difficult problem on the board, then stepped aside with a smug expression, arms crossed. The entire class held its breath, waiting to see how John would respond. Would he falter under pressure? Would he admit defeat and slink away embarrassed? Or worse, would he try to bluff his way through it? To everyone's astonishment, John stood up calmly and approached the board. Without hesitation, he picked up a marker and began solving the problem step by step. His movements were deliberate, his handwriting neat, and his logic impeccable. Within minutes, he had not only solved the equation but also added a brief explanation of why certain steps were necessary. When he turned around, the room erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Dr. Hartley, however, refused to acknowledge his success openly. Instead, her lips curled into a thin smile. "Well done," she said, her voice betraying a hint of irritation. "But don't think this is over. We'll see if you can keep up when the problems get harder." And just like that, a subtle rivalry began to form between teacher and student. For Dr. Hartley, it wasn't just about testing John's abilities anymore. It was personal. She prided herself on being able to challenge even the brightest minds, and the idea that someone outside her carefully curated circle of intellectuals might outshine her students was unacceptable. What she didn't realize, though, was that John wasn't just playing along. He was enjoying every moment of it. Unbeknownst to Dr. Hartley, John wasn't just some random celebrity dipping his toes into academia. Beneath his unassuming exterior lay a brilliant mind, one that had spent years exploring the intricacies of mathematics purely for the joy of it. While Hollywood knew him as Keanu Reeves, action star and heartthrob, the world of numbers knew him as a quiet genius, with a knack for unraveling the universe's deepest mysteries. For now, however, Dr. Hartley remained blissfully unaware of his true identity. All she knew was that this enigmatic figure sitting in her classroom had sparked a fire within her, a desire to push him to his limits, to expose any cracks in his facade. But little did she know, the real challenge wouldn't be breaking him, it would be confronting her own biases and assumptions. The tension in Dr. Evelyn Hartley's calculus class was palpable the following week. Word had spread quickly about John, how he'd effortlessly solved that tricky derivative problem on the board, leaving everyone stunned. Some students whispered theories during breaks, speculating whether he was secretly a math prodigy hiding in plain sight, or just someone who happened to get lucky with one equation. Others admired his calm demeanor and wondered if they could ever match his level of confidence. But no matter what anyone thought, one thing was certain: Dr. Hartley wasn't done testing him. Dr. Hartley spent hours preparing for her next lecture, determined to stump John once and for all. She scoured textbooks, online forums, and even old graduate-level exams to find problems so complex that even her brightest students would struggle. Finally, she settled on a particularly thorny challenge involving optimization, a topic notorious for tripping up even seasoned mathematicians. It required not only technical skill but also creativity, forcing solvers to think outside the box. Smiling smugly to herself, she wrote the problem neatly on a piece of paper and tucked it into her bag, ready to unveil it in front of the entire class. When the day arrived, Dr. Hartley strode into the lecture hall with an air of quiet triumph. The room fell silent as she placed her notes on the podium and surveyed the students. Her gaze lingered on John, who sat quietly toward the back, jotting something down in his notebook. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady and authoritative. "Today we're going to tackle a real-world application of calculus. This problem isn't just theoretical, it's practical, challenging, and requires deep understanding." She turned to the board and began writing out the details of the problem. As she worked, the murmurs in the room grew louder. Students leaned forward, squinting at the equations and diagrams taking shape before them. Even the teaching assistants exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsure how to approach it themselves. When Dr. Hartley finished, she stepped back and folded, her arms across her chest, scanning the sea of bewildered faces. "Now," she said, her tone dripping with challenge, "who wants to give this a shot?" For a moment there was complete silence. No hands went up. The students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Then, predictably, Dr. Hartley's sharp eyes landed on John. A sly smile crept onto her face as she addressed him directly. "John, since you seemed so comfortable last time, why don't you take a crack at this? Unless, of course, you'd rather leave it to someone else?" The room erupted into hushed whispers. Everyone knew exactly what Dr. Hartley was doing. She was singling him out again, trying to prove that his earlier success had been a fluke. John didn't react immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying the problem on the board with an expression of mild interest. After a few seconds, he closed his notebook, stood up, and walked to the front of the room without saying a word. As he picked up the marker, the atmosphere shifted. Gone was the casual humor from the previous session. Now, there was a sense of anticipation, almost reverence. John studied the problem carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, without hesitation, he began solving it step by step. His movements were deliberate, each stroke of the marker precise and purposeful. He started by breaking the problem into smaller components, explaining aloud how he planned to isolate variables and identify constraints. "It's important to visualize the scenario first," he said, drawing a simple diagram to represent the situation described in the problem. "Once we understand the relationships between these elements, finding the optimal solution becomes much easier." His explanation was clear and concise, making the seemingly impossible problem look almost manageable. As he worked through the calculations, the students watched in awe. They weren't just seeing numbers and symbols on the board. They were witnessing a masterclass in logical thinking. John's methodical approach revealed layers of insight that none of them had considered before. By the time he reached the final step, the room was completely silent, save for the soft scratching of the marker against the board. When John finally turned around, there was a collective gasp. Not only had he solved the problem, but he'd done so elegantly, presenting a solution that was both efficient and easy to follow. Several students instinctively clapped while others simply stared, mouths agape. Even the teaching assistants exchanged looks of disbelief, muttering phrases like, "How did he do that?" and "I've never seen anything like it." But Dr. Hartley wasn't impressed, at least not outwardly. Instead, her lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw tightening slightly. For a brief moment, she looked genuinely shaken, as though she hadn't anticipated him succeeding again. However, her pride refused to let her show any sign of admiration. Clearing her throat, she forced a tight smile and said, "Well, I suppose you've managed to solve it. Good job." Her tone was dismissive, almost condescending, as if she were trying to downplay his achievement. But John didn't seem fazed. He returned the marker to its holder and gave a small nod to the class before heading back to his seat. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice calm and composed. Despite her outward composure, Dr. Hartley couldn't ignore the growing unease gnawing at her. This wasn't supposed to happen. In her mind, John was still just a celebrity playing dress-up in her classroom, a man whose primary talent lay in reciting lines on screen, not unraveling mathematical puzzles. Yet here he was, consistently outperforming her top students and demonstrating a depth of knowledge that bordered on extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Hartley doubled down on her efforts to expose what she believed must be some kind of trickery. She assigned increasingly difficult homework problems, designed quizzes with intentionally obscure questions, and peppered her lectures with advanced topics far beyond the scope of the syllabus. Each time, John rose to the occasion, tackling every challenge with ease and precision. Whether it was multivariable calculus, differential equations, or integrals, he handled them all with the same effortless grace. What frustrated Dr. Hartley most, however, was the reaction of the other students. Far from resenting John for being better than them, they rallied around him, treating him like a hero. During group projects, they eagerly sought his input, valuing his insights above anyone else's. Even the teaching assistants, who initially viewed him with skepticism, began consulting him privately for help with grading and lesson planning. It was as though John had become the unofficial leader of the class, an authority figure whose presence overshadowed hers. Dr. Hartley found herself growing more irritable with each passing day. She snapped at students over minor mistakes, criticized their work harshly, and became increasingly short-tempered during office hours. Her frustration boiled over one afternoon when she caught two teaching assistants discussing John's latest solution to a particularly tricky integral. Rolling her eyes, she interrupted them mid-conversation. "Honestly, is this all anyone can talk about anymore? Yes, he's good at math. Big deal. Let's focus on actual learning instead of obsessing over some anomaly." Her words hung heavy in the air, met with awkward silence. The teaching assistants exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing. Deep down, they knew Dr. Hartley's anger stemmed from her inability to accept that someone outside her academic bubble could excel in her field. But confronting her about it felt like a losing battle, so they kept their thoughts to themselves. Meanwhile, John remained unfazed by the drama swirling around him. If anything, he seemed amused by Dr. Hartley's antics, viewing them as part of the larger game they were playing. To him, this wasn't about proving superiority or earning accolades. It was about the joy of solving problems, of diving headfirst into the beauty of mathematics. And while he understood that Dr. Hartley's hostility stemmed from insecurity, he chose not to engage further. Instead, he focused on helping his classmates, offering guidance whenever they needed it, and encouraging them to embrace the challenges ahead. Still, Dr. Hartley wasn't ready to concede defeat. Determined to settle the score once and for all, she devised a plan that she hoped would finally expose John's limitations, or at least force him to admit that he wasn't infallible. During the next lecture, she announced a special assignment, a theoretical problem that had baffled mathematicians for decades. Known as the Hartley conjecture, a name she had jokingly given it years ago, it dealt with nonlinear systems and had resisted every attempt at resolution. "This," she declared dramatically, pointing to the board where the problem was, written, "is the ultimate test of mathematical prowess. If anyone here thinks they're truly exceptional, this is your chance to prove it." Her eyes locked onto John, gleaming with a mix of defiance and desperation. "Go ahead, John. Impress us." The room fell silent once more. All eyes turned to John, waiting to see how he would respond. Would he rise to the challenge yet again? Or had Dr. Hartley finally pushed him too far? Unbeknownst to everyone, including Dr. Hartley, the stakes of this confrontation were about to reach new heights. What started as a personal vendetta was about to evolve into something far greater, forcing both teacher and student to confront truths they weren't prepared for. The announcement of the Hartley conjecture sent ripples through the classroom, though not the kind Dr. Evelyn Hartley had anticipated. Instead of fear or intimidation, a strange sense of excitement buzzed in the air. The students exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes at what they now saw as another attempt to corner John, while others leaned forward with genuine curiosity. They'd come to admire his quiet brilliance, and many were eager to see how he would handle this latest challenge. Even the teaching assistants seemed intrigued, whispering among themselves about whether anyone, let alone a student, could actually solve such a notoriously difficult problem. John, however, didn't react immediately. He sat quietly in his seat, staring at the board where Dr. Hartley had written out the conjecture in meticulous detail. His expression was unreadable, neither confident nor intimidated, just thoughtful. It was as if he were already dissecting the problem in his mind, searching for patterns and connections that might lead to a solution. When Dr. Hartley's sharp voice cut through the silence, "Well, are you going to take it on? Or are you all talk?" He finally looked up, meeting her gaze with a calmness that bordered on unsettling. "I'll give it a try," he said simply, his tone neutral but firm. There was no bravado in his words, no hint of arrogance. He sounded like someone accepting a friendly challenge rather than engaging in a high-stakes battle of wits. With that, he grabbed his notebook and began jotting down notes, ignoring the weight of everyone's expectations. That evening, John found himself poring over textbooks and research papers in his small apartment. Spread across his desk were scribbled diagrams, equations, and references to obscure mathematical theories. Though he loved solving problems, this one was different. It wasn't just about proving his skill. It was about understanding something deeper, something that had eluded even seasoned mathematicians. The Hartley conjecture dealt with nonlinear systems, which were notoriously unpredictable because they resisted traditional methods of analysis. These systems behaved chaotically, making them nearly impossible to model accurately. For hours, John wrestled with the problem, testing various approaches and discarding those that didn't work. At times, frustration crept in. He'd hit dead ends, run into contradictions, or find himself stuck in loops of logic that led nowhere. But instead of giving up, he embraced the struggle. To him, mathematics wasn't about instant gratification. It was about persistence, creativity, and the thrill of discovery. Every failure brought him closer to insight. Every misstep revealed new possibilities. By midnight, exhaustion began to set in, but John refused to stop. He brewed a fresh cup of coffee and returned to his desk, determined to push through. He reviewed his notes. Something caught his eye, a subtle pattern he hadn't noticed before. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it hinted at a potential breakthrough. Excitement surged through him as he dove deeper, reworking his calculations and refining his approach. By dawn, he had sketched out a framework that showed promise, though it still needed refinement. When John walked into class the following week, there was an undeniable energy in his step. He carried his notebook with care, its pages filled with dense equations and diagrams. The other students noticed the change immediately. He seemed more focused, more alive, as if he'd unlocked something profound. Dr. Hartley, too, picked up on the shift. Her usual smirk faltered slightly when she saw the determined look in his eyes. "Well?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Have you solved it? Or should we prepare ourselves for disappointment?" John ignored her sarcasm and stepped up to the board without hesitation. Picking up the marker, he began explaining his findings. First, he outlined the core issue of the conjecture, the chaotic behavior of non-linear systems, and why existing methods failed to address it. Then he introduced a novel framework he'd developed, one that combined elements of chaos theory with advanced calculus techniques. His explanation was clear and methodical, breaking down complex ideas into digestible pieces so even the less experienced students could follow along. As he worked through the steps, the room grew quieter. Students stopped fidgeting in their seats and leaned forward, captivated by the elegance of his solution. Even Dr. Hartley, who had initially intended to mock him, found herself drawn in. She couldn't deny the brilliance of his approach. It was innovative, rigorous, and most importantly, correct. When John reached the final step and demonstrated how his framework resolved the conjecture, the entire class erupted into applause. But Dr. Hartley wasn't ready to celebrate. Instead, her face darkened with suspicion. Clapping her hands sharply to regain control of the room, she silenced the cheering students and turned to John with a scowl. "This is impressive," she admitted grudgingly. "But how do we know you didn't plagiarize it? Did you copy this from some obscure journal or consult outside experts?" Her accusation hung heavy in the air, sucking the joy out of the moment. Several students gasped, shocked by her blatant distrust. Others exchanged angry glances, murmuring under their breath about how unfair she was being. John, however, remained composed. Setting the marker down, he faced her directly, his expression calm but firm. "If you're questioning my integrity," he said evenly, "I can assure you I came up with this solution entirely on my own. But if you need proof, I'm happy to provide it." With that, he pulled out printed emails from prominent mathematicians he'd corresponded with over the years. These exchanges discussed his insights into similar problems and praised his originality. He also shared drafts of papers he'd written, highlighting concepts that aligned closely with the framework he'd presented. By the time he finished, laying out his evidence, there was no denying the authenticity of his work. Dr. Hartley stood frozen, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. For the first time, she realized she might have underestimated him, not just as a student, but as a person. The realization hit her hard, forcing her to confront the uncomfortable truth. She had let her ego blind her to the possibility that someone outside her academic world could possess extraordinary talent. In the days that followed, news of John's achievements spread like wildfire. Word reached the university administration, alumni networks, and eventually the media. Articles appeared online praising his dual identity as both an actor and a mathematician, marveling at how seamlessly he balanced two vastly different fields. Interviews poured in, and John handled them with characteristic humility, deflecting attention away from himself and toward the beauty of mathematics. Meanwhile, Dr. Hartley retreated into solitude, grappling with the fallout of her actions. Her reputation took a hit as students criticized her behavior, accusing her of favoritism and bias. Colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to defend her hostile treatment of John. Worst of all, she couldn't escape the nagging guilt of having wrongfully accused someone who clearly deserved recognition. One afternoon, unable to bear the isolation any longer, she decided to reach out to John. Knocking softly on the door of his dorm room, she waited nervously until he answered. When he saw her standing there, his expression softened. "Dr. Hartley," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "What brings you here?" She hesitated, unsure where to begin. Finally, she sighed and met his gaze. "I owe you an apology," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I judged you unfairly, and I treated you with disrespect. That wasn't right, and I'm sorry." To her surprise, John smiled warmly. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. "I appreciate your honesty, and for what it's worth, I understand where you were coming from. We all make mistakes." His forgiveness caught her off guard, filling her with a mixture of relief and shame. In that moment, she vowed to change, not just for herself, but for her students. From then on, she promised to approach teaching with humility and openness, recognizing that brilliance could come from unexpected places. Though their relationship started rocky, John and Dr. Hartley eventually developed a mutual respect that transcended their initial conflict. For John, it was a reminder of why he loved mathematics, its ability to connect people, challenge assumptions, and inspire growth. And for Dr. Hartley, it became a turning point, a chance to redefine her role as an educator and embrace the endless possibilities of learning. The weeks following John's groundbreaking solution to the Hartley conjecture marked a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone involved. The classroom dynamic shifted in ways no one could have predicted. Students who had once cowered under Dr. Evelyn Hartley's sharp critiques now walked into lectures with newfound confidence, inspired by John's example. They began asking tougher questions, challenging each other during group discussions, and even daring to approach Dr. Hartley after class for clarification on complex topics. It was as if John's success had unlocked something within them, a belief that they too could rise to meet difficult challenges. Dr. Hartley, meanwhile, struggled to adjust to her altered role. Her public apology to John had been sincere, but it didn't erase the lingering tension between her and the students. Many still viewed her with skepticism, unsure whether she truly regretted her past behavior or was simply putting on an act to save face. To make matters worse, some colleagues at the university continued to distance themselves from her, whispering behind closed doors about how her arrogance had tarnished the department's reputation. She felt isolated, misunderstood, and burdened by guilt. Determined to rebuild trust, Dr. Hartley threw herself into her work with renewed focus. Gone were the days of singling out students for humiliation. Instead, she adopted a more collaborative teaching style. During lectures, she encouraged open dialogue, inviting students to share their thoughts without fear of judgment. When someone made a mistake, she reframed it as an opportunity to learn rather than a reason for ridicule. Slowly but surely, her efforts began to pay off. Students started participating more actively, their initial hesitation giving way to genuine engagement. For John, life became a whirlwind of attention and admiration. News of his dual identity as both a Hollywood star and a mathematical genius spread far beyond UCLA. Journalists clamored for interviews, eager to uncover the story behind the actor who solved the unsolvable. Social media buzzed with memes and hashtags celebrating his unlikely achievement. Some fans joked that he should rebrand himself as Keanu Reeves, while others marveled at his ability to excel in two fields so vastly different from each other. Despite the sudden fame, John remained grounded. In interviews, he downplayed his accomplishments, emphasizing that mathematics wasn't about competition or glory. It was about curiosity, exploration, and the joy of discovery. He often credited his teachers, mentors, and peers for shaping his understanding of the subject. going out of his way to highlight the collaborative nature of academic research. His humility only endeared him further to those around him, earning him respect not just as a celebrity, but as a thoughtful, introspective individual. One evening, after a particularly long day of filming, John received an email from Dr. Hartley. At first glance, it seemed like a routine message, perhaps a reminder about upcoming assignments or a note about office hours. But as he read through the lines, he realized it was something much deeper. Dr. Hartley had written to express her gratitude, not just for solving the conjecture, but for inspiring her to become a better teacher. She admitted that his patience and kindness during their conflict had forced her to confront her own flaws, leading to a personal transformation she hadn't thought possible. "I never imagined I'd learn so much from a student," she wrote. "You've reminded me why I fell in love with teaching in the first place, the chance to nurture young minds and watch them grow. Thank you for showing me that brilliance can come from anywhere, and for forgiving me when I failed to see it." John smiled softly as he finished reading. Though he had already forgiven her, her words touched him deeply. Replying promptly, he thanked her for her honesty and encouraged her to keep pushing forward. "Change isn't easy," he wrote back, "but it's worth it. You're doing great work, and your students are lucky to have you." Their exchange marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Over time, Dr. Hartley confided in John about her struggles with self-doubt and imposter syndrome, admitting that she often felt pressure to prove herself in a male-dominated field. In turn, John shared stories about his own journey, the challenges of balancing acting and academics, the loneliness of pursuing passions few people understood, and the importance of staying true to oneself despite external expectations. Their conversations became a source of strength for both of them, bridging the gap between teacher and student in a way neither had anticipated. As the semester drew to a close, the university organized a special symposium to celebrate John's contributions to mathematics. Faculty members, students, and invited guests gathered in the auditorium to hear him present his findings on the Hartley conjecture. The event was standing room only, with attendees spilling into the aisles and crowding near the doors. Cameras flashed as John took the stage, his calm demeanor masking the excitement bubbling inside him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice warm and welcoming. "When I enrolled in this course, I never imagined it would lead to this moment. Solving the Hartley conjecture wasn't just about proving myself. It was about exploring the beauty of mathematics and sharing that experience with others." He went on to explain his solution in detail, using visuals and analogies to make the concept accessible to non-mathematicians in the audience. By the end of his presentation, the room erupted into applause, with several faculty members rising to their feet in admiration. Even Dr. Hartley joined in, her eyes glistening with pride as she watched the man who had once been her adversary transform into a beacon of inspiration for everyone present. Afterward, dozens of students lined up to speak with John, asking for advice on everything from choosing a career path to overcoming self-doubt. He listened patiently to each question, offering thoughtful responses and encouraging words. One shy freshman summed it up best when she said, "You've shown us that we don't have to fit into boxes. We can be whoever we want to be." While John reveled in the support of his peers, Dr. Hartley quietly reflected on her own growth. Teaching had always been her passion, but for years she had let fear and insecurity dictate her methods. Now she understood that true leadership meant empowering others, not tearing them down. Inspired by John's example, she proposed a new initiative aimed at fostering interdisciplinary collaboration among students. The program paired individuals from diverse backgrounds, engineers with artists, biologists with musicians, to tackle real-world problems together. Its success exceeded her wildest expectations, earning praise from administrators and participants alike. Years later, when asked about her legacy, Dr. Hartley often credited John with helping her rediscover the heart of education. "He taught me that learning isn't about winning or losing," she said in an interview. "It's about connection, curiosity, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. If I've made any difference in my students' lives, it's because he reminded me what really matters." As for John, He continued to pursue his dual passions, seamlessly blending the worlds of entertainment and academia. He published several papers, attended conferences, and occasionally guest lectured at universities around the world. Yet despite his achievements, he remained humble, always quick to credit others for their contributions. To him, the real reward lay not in accolades or recognition, but in the knowledge that he had inspired others to dream bigger, think deeper, and believe in themselves. In the end, the story of the calculus professor and the math genius wasn't just about equations or conjectures. It was about human connection, resilience, and the transformative power of forgiveness. Through their shared journey, both Dr. Hartley and John discovered that greatness isn't measured by titles or accomplishments, but by the impact we have on those around us. And in doing so, they proved that even the most unlikely partnerships can yield extraordinary results. The years rolled on, and the ripple effects of John's time in Dr. Evelyn Hartley's calculus class continued to spread far beyond UCLA's campus. What had started as a tense rivalry between teacher and student evolved into a profound narrative about growth, humility, and the unexpected ways people can inspire one another. For both John and Dr. Hartley, life took new directions, ones they never could have predicted when their paths first crossed. Dr. Hartley threw herself into her revamped teaching philosophy with a fervor that surprised even her closest colleagues. Her initiative to foster interdisciplinary collaboration became a cornerstone of the university's curriculum. Students from all walks of life were encouraged to step outside their comfort zones, combining skills and perspectives to tackle real-world challenges. Engineers worked alongside poets to design sustainable housing solutions. Biologists partnered with musicians to create educational materials for underserved communities. The results were nothing short of remarkable, sparking innovation and creativity across disciplines. But perhaps the most significant change was in how Dr. Hartley interacted with her students. Gone was the stern, intimidating professor who thrived on making others feel small. In her place stood a mentor who genuinely cared about nurturing talent and fostering confidence. She began hosting weekly office hours without judgment, where students could drop by to discuss anything, from coursework to personal struggles without fear of criticism. These sessions quickly became popular, drawing crowds of students seeking guidance or simply craving a listening ear. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Former students who had once dreaded her classes now reached out to thank her for helping them discover their potential. One email in particular stood out. It came from a former math major who had initially dropped out of the program after feeling overwhelmed by Dr. Hartley's harsh critiques during his freshman year. After hearing about her transformation, he decided to return to school, this time thriving under her supportive mentorship. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself," he wrote. "You've changed my life." For Dr. Hartley, these messages served as reminders of why she had chosen teaching in the first place. They also reinforced the lesson John had taught her, that brilliance comes in many forms, often hidden beneath layers of self-doubt or unconventional circumstances. She made it her mission to seek out those hidden sparks, encouraging students to embrace their unique strengths rather than conforming to rigid expectations. Meanwhile, John's dual identity as an actor and mathematician blossomed into something extraordinary. While Hollywood continued to celebrate him for his iconic roles, the academic world embraced him as a trailblazer, a rare figure who bridged the gap between pop culture and intellectual rigor. He published groundbreaking papers on topics ranging from chaos theory to computational modeling, earning accolades from experts worldwide. Yet despite his growing fame, he remained deeply committed to mentoring young minds. John frequently returned to UCLA to guest lecture, always insisting on doing so without fanfare. He'd walk into classrooms unannounced, sitting quietly at the back until invited to speak. His presence alone electrified the room, inspiring students to push themselves harder and think more critically. During one such visit, a nervous graduate student approached him after class, clutching a notebook filled with half-formed ideas for a thesis. "I don't know if any of this makes sense," she admitted shyly, "but I wanted to try." John smiled warmly, flipping through the pages with genuine interest. "These are great thoughts," he said. Don't worry about having everything figured out right away. That's what exploration is all about. He spent the next hour discussing her work, offering suggestions while emphasizing the importance of trusting her instincts. By the time they parted ways, the student's eyes sparkled with renewed determination. Beyond academia, John used his platform to advocate for STEM education, particularly among marginalized communities. He founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing resources and mentorship to aspiring mathematicians and scientists from underrepresented backgrounds. Through workshops, scholarships, and partnerships with schools, the initiative aimed to dismantle barriers and create opportunities for future innovators. At its heart lay a simple yet powerful message: if I can do it, so can you. Years later, fate brought John and Dr. Hartley together again at a mathematics conference held in San Francisco. The event drew scholars, educators, and enthusiasts from around the globe, all eager to share their latest discoveries and insights. When John's name appeared on the schedule as one of the keynote speakers, whispers rippled through the crowd. Few attendees realized that the enigmatic professor introducing him would be none other than Dr. Hartley herself. As she stepped onto the stage to introduce him, the audience erupted into applause. Dr. Hartley paused, soaking in the moment before addressing the crowd. It's an honor to introduce someone who has not only transformed my perspective on teaching but also reminded me of the boundless potential within every student, she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. John exemplifies what it means to pursue knowledge with passion, humility, and grace. Please join me in welcoming him. When John walked onto the stage, the applause grew louder, lasting several minutes before finally subsiding. As he looked out at the sea of faces, his eyes met Dr. Hartley's, and he offered her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Dr. Hartley," he said, his tone warm and sincere. "Your words mean more to me than you'll ever know." His speech focused on the intersection of art and science, weaving anecdotes from his acting career with lessons learned in mathematics. He spoke about the parallels between storytelling and problem-solving, emphasizing the importance of curiosity, empathy, and perseverance in both fields. "Whether you're crafting a character or unraveling an equation," he said, "the key is to stay open to possibilities. Sometimes the answers lie in places you least expect." By the end of his talk, the audience was on its feet, cheering wildly. Several attendees lingered afterward, eager to shake his hand or snap a photo. Among them was Dr. Hartley, who waited patiently until the crowd thinned out. When it was finally just the two of them, she extended her hand, smiling softly. "That was incredible," she said. "You've come so far." John chuckled, shaking his head modesty. "We both have," he replied. "And honestly, I owe a lot of it to you. If it weren't for your challenges and your eventual support, I might not have pushed myself as hard as I did." They stood there for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. From adversaries to allies, their relationship had transcended labels, becoming a testament to the power of forgiveness and mutual respect. As they walked out of the auditorium together, chatting animatedly about upcoming projects and shared interests, it was clear that their bond had deepened into something truly special. Back at UCLA, rumors circulated about the reunion, fueling excitement among students and faculty alike. Some joked that John and Dr. Hartley should co-teach a course, blending their unique approaches to inspire the next generation of thinkers. Others speculated about potential collaborations, envisioning research papers co-authored by the unlikely duo. While neither entertained the idea seriously, the mere possibility sparked imaginations and reignited conversations about the importance of breaking down silos between disciplines. In the end, the story of the calculus professor and the math genius became a legend, a tale passed down through generations of students, each adding their own twist to the narrative. To some, it was a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating others. To others, it was a celebration of resilience and redemption. But to everyone who heard it, the story carried a universal truth: that greatness isn't defined by titles, accomplishments, or appearances. It's measured by the connections we forge and the lives we touch along the way. The years rolled on, and the bond between John and Dr. Evelyn Hartley only grew stronger. What had once been a contentious relationship transformed into something far more profound, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared passion, and an unshakable belief in the power of learning. Their paths continued to intersect in unexpected ways, each encounter leaving an indelible mark, not just on them but on everyone fortunate enough to witness their dynamic. Dr. Hartley's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Gone was the rigid, perfectionist professor who valued intellectual superiority above all else. In her place stood a mentor who embraced vulnerability, celebrated diversity, and championed the untapped potential within every student. Her interdisciplinary program became a model for universities worldwide, inspiring educators to rethink traditional approaches to teaching. Students flocked to her classes, eager to experience the unique blend of rigor and compassion she brought to the table. But perhaps her greatest legacy lay in the lives she touched outside the classroom. She began mentoring young teachers, sharing the lessons she'd learned from her own journey. Teaching isn't about proving how smart you are, she often told them. It's about creating space for others to shine. Many of these mentees went on to become leaders in their fields, carrying forward her message of inclusivity and empathy. Her friendship with John played a pivotal role in this evolution. They stayed in touch long after his time at UCLA, exchanging emails, phone calls, and occasional visits whenever their busy schedules allowed. These conversations weren't limited to mathematics or academia. They delved into life's deeper questions, purpose, identity, and the pursuit of meaning. For Dr. Hartley, these discussions were a lifeline, grounding her during moments of self-doubt and reminding her of the joy that came from connecting with others. John, too, found himself profoundly changed by their relationship. While he had always been humble, the experience of working alongside Dr. Hartley deepened his appreciation for the complexities of human nature. He realized that even the most accomplished individuals carried insecurities, fears, and regrets, and that acknowledging those vulnerabilities was key to growth. This insight shaped not only his interactions with students but also his approach to storytelling through film. In Hollywood, John became known as an advocate for authenticity in storytelling. He sought out projects that highlighted the struggles and triumphs of ordinary people, believing that everyone had a story worth telling. One of his most acclaimed films centered around a struggling high school teacher who rediscovered her love for education after forming an unlikely friendship with a gifted yet misunderstood student. Critics praised the movie for its emotional depth and nuanced portrayal of resilience, unaware that it drew inspiration from John's own experiences with Dr. Hartley. His nonprofit organization flourished, expanding its reach to include international programs aimed at bridging gaps in STEM education. Through partnerships with schools, governments, and private organizations, the initiative provided resources and training to educators in underserved communities. Workshops focused on creative problem-solving techniques, encouraging participants to view challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. Testimonials poured in from beneficiaries, many of whom credited the program with changing their lives. Despite his success, John remained grounded, attributing much of his achievements to the lessons he'd learned along the way. "I'm not special because I can do math or act," he said in an interview. "I'm lucky because I've had amazing teachers, people like Dr. Hartley, who believed in me when I needed it most." One evening, several years after their initial meeting, John received an invitation to speak at UCLA's annual commencement ceremony. The theme of the event was Unexpected Connections, celebrating the ways seemingly disparate elements could come together to create something extraordinary. When he accepted the offer, he immediately thought of Dr. Hartley, knowing she would appreciate the irony of the situation. On the day of the ceremony, the university's auditorium buzzed with excitement. Graduates clad in caps and gowns filled the seats, their faces glowing with pride and anticipation. Parents, siblings, and friends packed the rows behind them, snapping photos and whispering words of encouragement. As John took the stage, the crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly as he adjusted the microphone and scanned the sea of smiling faces. "Thank you," he began, his voice warm and steady. It's an incredible honor to be here today, surrounded by so many talented individuals ready to take on the world. He paused, letting the moment sink in before continuing. When I think about my own journey, I'm reminded of a quote by Albert Einstein. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. That's exactly what we're doing here, taking the next step forward, trusting that the road ahead will reveal itself as we go. He then shared the story of his time in Dr. Hartley's calculus class, recounting the challenges they faced and the lessons they ultimately learned from one another. At first glance, we couldn't have been more different, he admitted. She was the tough-as-nails professor. I was the actor pretending to blend in. But beneath those surface-level differences, we discovered something powerful, a shared love for learning and a willingness to grow. The audience listened intently, hanging on every word. When he described solving the Hartley conjecture, the room erupted into laughter and applause. By the time he reached the part where Dr. Hartley apologized, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. That moment taught me something invaluable, he concluded. No matter who you are or where you come from, it's never too late to change, to admit when you're wrong, to embrace new perspectives, and to build bridges instead of walls. As he stepped away from the podium, the applause grew deafening. Dr. Hartley, seated among the faculty members, rose to her feet, tears streaming down her face. She waved him over, pulling him into a tight hug as the crowd cheered. It was a poignant reminder of how far they'd come and how much they had achieved together. After the ceremony, John and Dr. Hartley found themselves alone on the steps, outside the auditorium, watching as graduates posed for photos and exchanged heartfelt farewells. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the campus. For a moment, neither spoke, content to simply soak in the beauty of the scene. You know, Dr. Hartley said, finally breaking the silence, when I first met you, I thought you were just another celebrity looking for attention. Turns out you were the best teacher I ever had. John chuckled, shaking his head. And you were the toughest critic I ever faced. But honestly, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. They shared a laugh, the kind that comes from years of shared history and mutual understanding. As they parted ways, promising to stay in touch, it was clear that their story wasn't ending. It was merely evolving, branching off into new directions while remaining rooted in the same core values: curiosity, humility, and the unwavering belief that greatness lies not in individual achievements, but in the connections we forge along the way. For John and Dr. Hartley, life had come full circle. From adversaries to allies, from skeptics to believers, they had proven that even the most unlikely partnerships could yield extraordinary results. And as they walked away from the university that had brought them together, they carried with them a timeless lesson: that the true measure of success isn't fame or accolades. It's the impact we leave on the hearts and minds of others.